Okay, thanks everybody for being with us, the people here in the room and also the people online. Our guest today is Orestis from the University of Padova. His talk is about communication and the emergence of the unidimensional world. I see that this is common work with two other important co-authors from the University of Cyprus. We thank Orestis for being here with us, as well as the Gates Journal for the kind, how can I call it? Sponsorship, yeah, for this seminar, as well as for another seminar that is to be organized in the next semester, I guess, right? Okay. So again, thank you all. If you have comments and questions, the people online, you can ask them by writing in the chat, if you don't mind. And yeah, basically this is it. Orestis, the floor is yours. And again, thanks for being with us.
No, thanks so much. It's a real pleasure being here. I've been hearing only good things about the department, so it's a pleasure here meet you all. Your compatriots Philippos is sending us greetings. It's John Nicolas Sakas, who some of us know as well. So let me put things straightforward. This is going to be an experiment, and mainly an experiment on a paper by Marzo Vallanos and people. Of course, we are going to be accompanying it with some further theoretical conjectures that we're going to put forward. And it is going to be about this idea of opinions being unidimensional. And I will be very specific on what it means in a bit, but already in mind, we're going to be referring to correlated opinions. So, you know, our world, as we all know, is a complicated answer. You know, there's like tons of issues that each of us can have a different opinion upon. You know, we can think of politics, so the economy, lifestyle, and we can have all different opinions. So we can think of the economy redistribution, we can think of abortion, gun possession in the US, lifestyle features as well, and each of us may have a different opinion on each of these issues. So, you know, a priori, we have a multi-dimensional world. And each of us normally is expected to have an opinion on each of these dimensions. So, you know, normally to describe this world, we would need as many dimensions as issues to describe an individual. However, often it is enough to use a unidimensional spectrum to describe opinions on all dimensions. And just let me go straight to the typical example. You know, the typical example would be left-right in politics. So if I describe you someone as leftist, more or less you can think their opinions on a bunch of issues. If I describe you someone as a rightist, more or less, you know, you can think their opinions on a bunch of issues. So opinions in this sense are going to be correlated. So moving a bit away of the politics example, you know, just to fix ideas, let's focus on a two-dimensional world. So imagine here I'm presenting you 2 dimensions. People may have different opinion on CrossFit. This is a type of gymnastics that apparently was in fashion in Australia when we were writing the paper, and people was very keen to use this as an example of CrossFit. And the other one may be veganism. So here we have 5 individuals, and I'm using similar and simple notation as I will be doing in the lab experiment to, you know, stick to the same ideas. And here we're having these 5 individuals: individual 1, individual 2, individual 3, 4, 5. Individual 5 is someone who really likes CrossFit, doesn't like veganism. Individual 3 is someone who really likes veganism, doesn't like CrossFit. Now, this world is clearly multidimensional. I need 2 dimensions to describe the individual, right? So if I tell you individual 5 likes CrossFit, you have no idea what this means regarding veganism and so on. Instead, here, if I come into one of those 2 graphs, this is precisely what I would be referring to as a unidimensional world. Why? Because these individuals eventually are falling on a line. And on this line, when I tell you that if someone likes veganism, you know that this person doesn't like CrossFit, or if you know that this person doesn't like veganism, likes CrossFit. Similarly here, you know, where individual 3 really likes CrossFit and is keen on veganism and so on and so forth. So, in very simple terms, what we are after is a correlation here. And in practice, what we will be focusing on this paper, and I will not be working with correlations at all, is 3 different things that we have to keep for the rest of the talk in our mind. Number 1, unidimensionality, meaning that world number 2 and world number 3 here look like unidimensional. Second key element is going to be the relative positions. So what does the relative positions mean? That once individuals can be described by one dimension, the relative positions of individuals may vary. So here, this is a world where, individual 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So individual 1 and 5 are the extreme guys, extreme on this line. Individual 2 and 4 are more moderate, and 3 is the most moderate person here. Instead, if I come into this line, what I say is that now individual 1 and 3 are the extreme people, and 5 all of the sudden is a moderate person, okay? So two things to keep in mind, and what we will be working on is when can a world become unidimensional or not? And once this world is unidimensional, what can I say about individuals' relative positions on this line, whether they're going to be extremes or moderates and so on. The final distinction between these two graphs that I'm not going to focus at all as part of this talk is, of course, the direction of disagreement. So here, the disagreement goes, here people tend to agree more or less on CrossFit and disagree on mechanism. Here instead, people tend to agree more or less on mechanism and disagree on CrossFit. But this is something I will not be focusing at all during the talk. This is something that distinguishes these two worlds as well, but we can discuss this later. Now, having fixed these ideas, let's try to understand a bit why we care about those. So let me, oops, no, I can move it a bit. Minimize, that's worse. Minimize this one.
Yeah. You can yeah.
Here we go. That's it. So why do we care about this? Coming from a political economy background, we are all used to work with a unidimensional space. Take the standard IO approach of modeling model, coming into political economy with a Downsian model and so on. Typically, we tend to think, of political parties choosing positions, location in a 0-1 interval or similar. But this, apart from the theoretical tractability and lots of models being solved around the unidimensional policy, it has also empirical relevance. For example, there is lots of research in the US. Poole and Rosenthal have been able to explain that at least up to a few years ago, for long parts of the recent decades, voting patterns of US legislators could be explained by their ideology in a single dimension. So they could go and estimate the ideological positions of US legislators, and then with one dimension of disagreement, they were able to explain quite a bit of action. And indeed, also voters' opinions, there is strong correlations between voters' opinions on different issues. And actually, it is interesting, this is a paper by sociologists, De La Costa et al., where political and ideological cleavages tend to spill over to preferences over leisure activities, consumption, art. So let me put straight as an example the following. This is, here we go. This is back from the 2004 election, where this is an ad by the Club for Growth, the Political Action Committee. So these are lobbyists on the Republican side of the US who have been putting forward this TV ad against Howard Dean, who was one of the Democrat candidates. The Howard Dean was coming from Vermont and was presenting himself, and then the ad was going like that. Howard Dean should take his tax hiking, government expanding, latte drinking, shoes eating, Volvo driving, New York Times reading, Hollywood loving, left-wing freak show back to Vermont where it belongs. So this idea of the typical Democrats liking taxes, government expansion, latte drinking, New York Times reading, the correlated opinions across different issues. Now, this is of course motivating examples, and please do not think that I'm going to be able to explain or take this as something at the back of your mind. I'm not going to be claiming that what we are doing here is going to be really explaining this situation. But I think we all agree that often one dimension can describe disagreement across different issues. So now, what are we going to be doing here? We're going to look at a model where such a unidimensional world may arise endogenously through communication, and this is what inspires also the title of the paper. And the questions we're going to be asking is, when should we expect opinions to become unidimensional? and how can we predict the shape of disagreement. So what we are going to be doing is first present some simulations that are also generalized previous results on unidimensionality by the Marshall and Orestis people. And this 2003 QJ paper is the one that actually inspired this paper, because one of the predictions is about unidimensionality. And through this paper, what we're going to do is somehow validate their theory empirically through a lab experiment. But moreover, because of these conjectures we have on some specifications that are not included in the original work, highlight the importance of fixed communication networks in predicting the shape of disagreement. So this is going to become clear in a bit. But the paper is going to be communication in a network, updating of opinions through communication in a network, and the possibility of resulting to unidimensionality.
What's the meaning of the word fixed?
It will all come in a bit. Okay. It will all come in a bit. Things will be very clear.
Okay.
I apologize if it's not so clear yet. Now, in terms of the literature, this model is going to be one of opinion dynamics updating. And the type of work we're focusing on is similar to the one the Marshall analyzed, based on the group type of naive models of updating. So here people are not going to be sophisticated, and they're going to just be updating their opinions by taking some form of weighted averages of their opinions of their neighbors that they're going to be seeing around. And again, this will be very clear in a bit. Now, the Marshall et al. Use this type of updating, and this is the closest paper to us, to introduce this type of updating in a network and show this idea of unidimensionality coming in. Few other efforts to explain unidimensional opinions theoretically, and our paper, of course, links to some experimental research in opinion updating in networks. Now, all these papers I'm mentioning here typically have different treatments to focus on different research questions on opinion updating in a network, but they are all focusing on one single dimension of opinion updating. Instead, our paper is going to have two dimensions of disagreement or of our opinions, and people will be updating simultaneously their opinions on two issues, since after all, this is our main. In a single dimension, the typical research question is whether opinions after updating are going to eventually converge. So, the five of us start updating their opinions after exchanging opinions, whether we're going to converge to the same opinions or not. This is the typical, first question people may be interested in seeing in the lab. Other questions, and the reference is missing here, I apologize, is whether the information structure about the network, whether the people know the structure of their network or not, is going to be affecting the way they are updating their opinions and so on. Again, we are deviating quite a bit of those just from the mere fact of having a second dimension of communication. So now, let me go directly to the theory. The slides, well, they don't look too formal, but I will be super informal, because after all, I will just present you some results and simulations, so we don't need to focus too much on the formal results. But here the idea is how the good repeated weighted average model works. And this is the Marshall and Orestis people setting, the QJ paper. I'm giving you a summary of that. Imagine n agents that are going to be communicating repeatedly in opinions and update those on k issues. So we're going to be having k issues that we disagree upon or agree, and then n agents who are going to be communicating their opinions. Okay, so n agents, k issues, individuals are going to be observing some noise signals to start with. So in period 0, each of us, each individual is going to have an opinion on its different issues. And then in every period t, we are going to take these past opinions, starting with S0. So in S1, I'm going to take these opinions of S0 and update them according to this updating matrix T, which every round, as we will see, may vary a bit. But basically here we're having a very simple model of updating, I'll go directly to the example to make things super clear. Imagine a network with 5 individuals. So here we're having individual 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where individual 1 is observing the opinions of individual 2, individual 2 is observing the opinions of individual 1 and 3, individual 3 is observing the opinions of 2, 4, and 5. So its arrow is indicating the flow of information in the network. And take as a given example of a potential listening matrix, one where each individual assigns to their own past opinions and to the ones of the neighbors that they just heard equal weight. So imagine an individual 1 and I listen Manolis, who's individual 2. He tells me his opinion about the election, and then I'm going to update my opinions, assigning 50% weight on my own past opinion, 50% on his opinion that he just transferred to me. So 1/2, 1/2. Individual 2 instead is going to assign 1/3 on his own, on their own past opinion, 1/3 on individual 1, 1/3 on individual 2, and so on and so forth. So very simple model of naive updating of opinions. This is the group style of naive updating. And now if I come here and I multiply the opinions in period t-1 with this matrix, I'm obtaining the updated opinions 1 period after. Let's go to a very simple example. Imagine we have 2 dimensions. Dimension x, dimension y from 0 to 100, and these 5 individuals that I just described here are having opinions all around the area here, so all around the dimensions. Now remember, individual 1 is listening only the opinions of individual 2 and is assigning 50% weight to each of these opinions. So imagine in period 0 or period 1, individual 1 is here, individual 2 is here. One round of updating simply is going to take individual 1 midway between 1 and 2, and here is my individual 1 in period 1, period 2, after 1 round of updating. Okay, and now for individuals, for individual 5, I can also do that very easy because 5 is just listening the opinion of 4. So if I go here on my graph, 5 is here, 4 is here. After 1 round of updating, 5 just goes midway somewhere here. Okay, so this is a very simple thing with the other guys. I just assign, which 1/3, 1/4, and so on. And there is nothing sophisticated here. Naive process of opinion updating. What is the beauty in the QJ paper of the Marx-Avallanos and people? That if I keep doing this process of updating, so I started here, I did it once, and I landed here. Let me repeat it once more. So, from 1 to starting here, I'm bringing 1 midway between those 2 and so on and so forth. We are already in this 1 dimension that I described you before. Okay, and this is the QJ paper by them, giving rise to unidimensionality. Now, if I keep doing this process, of course, all these guys, at the limit, they are going to be converging to the same opinion. But what is important in the paper is that before converging to the same opinion across all issues, we will be having them on a line, this idea of unidimensionality described before. And there is even more in the theory, whether here people, as you can see on the line, are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as I told you, relative positions, where individual 1 and 5 are the 2 extremes. 3 is the one most moderate of the 5, and 24 and somewhere in between. This prediction comes in the QJ paper only from this T matrix. It doesn't matter where we started from, which configuration we started for. I could have started with 1, 2, 3, 5 in different configuration here. After a bit of updating, people would have been on a line. The line would have been different. It would have been like that, or like that. And this would depend on the initial configuration we started from. But the fact that 1 and 5 are the most extreme people, 3 is the one who is most moderate, and so on, just depends on the characteristics of the network structure. And that's the QJ paper. Okay? Now, what are we going to do in this paper? We're just going to do some simulations, extending a little bit the Marx-Avallanos and Spieper result. What they have assumed is that this T matrix could vary over time. And basically what they were doing is they were saying, okay, individuals can assign weight lambda to this T matrix that I showed you before. and 1 minus lambda to their own past opinions. So basically, this is, think of it as individuals becoming a potential idea that they become stubborn a bit as the time goes through. So maybe the first round of communication, I assign a lot of weight on this T matrix I presented you, and then as time passes, maybe I start putting less and less attention to the matrix and I stick to my own past opinion, potentially because I understand that there is no new information inside the structure here. So we're just repeating this information. So in the result, what is happening is that if I have a fixed under 9 T matrix here, then we can get the predictions I just told you. The crucial assumption is that this T matrix is always observing the same agents and is always assigning the same relative weights. So if I trust, every morning when I come in the department, I speak to the same individuals and they listen always their same opinions. And then I'm assigning them same relative weights every round of communication. So it cannot be that one day I use this matrix and then the day after I use something different than that. So these weights have to remain the same. And this is what we are extending here through the simulations. And it seems interesting to us that even if I permit different observed agents and different relative weights per round, this result generically holds. So here, the conjecture is that the unidimensionality still arises often in the process I just described you, even when the listening matrix varies in each round. We don't have a formal proof to be able to give you the conditions on the sequences of these listening matrices that need to hold so that this result goes through, and that's why we call it a conjecture. We know that the network has to stay strongly connected in its period. We know that agents do not become stubborn very quickly, and this is similar to the march of Emergence, but we are not, we didn't go all the way into proving this result. An important assumption that also is the case in our setting and in the demarch of Emergence setting is that these weights have to remain the same across all issues. So it cannot be that on issue X, I trust the Manuel is 50 and myself 50, and then on issue Y, I trust the Manuel is 70, myself 30. So we have to use the same 50-50 or 70-30 across all issues. And this is an important assumption in the model and also the simulations we have to forward. Of course, another interesting research question is how much can we perturbate this exact same weights across the two issues for this result to arise or not. And this is something that we think is interesting, but we have not done it. Now,
when you get opinions from other people, then you put more weight in your own opinion after the fact.
This is fine if I think this is here, right? So this lambda can vary over time. What I don't want is that we become stubborn too fast, because then we are never going to reach, here, look at this, just this example. After 3 rounds of updating, we are already on this line. In the lab, in the simulations, these are the simulations I'm showing you after several rounds of communication. What you observe is that in the first round, you're getting, you need a few initial rounds to get this convergence to this line. And then the action becomes less and less dramatic. So think of it like that. So, when we start all over the place, if this process goes through for a few rounds, then eventually we're getting this result. And what you don't want is that this is it. This condition basically is assuming that you're not becoming too stubborn too quickly. This is of course true. So now, here, this presents the results of the simulations that support the conjecture I just put you forward, where, as I said, the conjecture is permitting to observe different agents and assign different relative weights. And this is for 4 different networks. I will not enter into details because we will not be using those in the experiment, but I want to pay more attention to. But as you can see, think of it for the time being as correlation. It's not correlation, but to keep things simple in your mind. Think of this as the correlation of opinions, and you can see here for different 4 different networks We are creating random networks, how in all these 4 sets of simulations, opinions tend to become more and more correlated, even in the more generic process. Now, if I want to make some predictions about the long-run relative positions of the agents, remember here what I told you. I told you, if these were the matrix always, and we stick to this matrix, the Marshall innocence people are able to tell you that 1 and 5 are going to be extreme, 3 in the middle, and 2 and 4 somewhere in between. Now, if I permit individuals to observe different agents and assign them relative weights, and I create all these things randomly in my simulations, of course, it becomes very tough to be able to make any predictions on the relative opinions. So how should I know if out of these 5 individuals, 5 is going to be a moderate or an extremist? It's impossible. I have to put some further structure, right? And this is what we do in the simulations. If we add some further structure to the sequence of possible listening matrices, I can again give you some results on individuals' relative positions. So same with, so here I'm presenting 4 sets of simulations. In the 2 first, this looks really like electrocardiogram or whatever. There is nothing that I can tell you about. These are 50 individuals. I cannot tell you anything about the relative positions. Instead, in these 2 sets of simulations, I'm putting some structure, and you can see here that this is how they are starting my simulations in the beginning, and then how I can get some patterns on their opinions. Again, I'm not entering into details on purpose of the simulations because I'm going to come with experimental results. So, are we good? Okay. So I'm done with the theory and the conjectures we are putting forward, and I'm ready to go into the laboratory experiment. Is it okay, more or less? Are we clear, more or less?
So, can I ask a general question? We talk about networks. And in reality, there are networks, but there are the influences. How do you because the influences can be getting clouds, one another, like the divergence of opinion.
Okay, so I think something super important for all this, and this I can tell you with lots of confidence, is that we need the network to be strongly connected in its period. So if I have, the two different networks with an influence in each of them, and then there is nothing happening, there is no interaction between all those, then all these results cannot go through. Now, if it happens that one individual has a lot of links, then some other individuals have less links and so on, it will depend if we are going to be getting this result or not. For what we are doing in the lab and what matters here.
So that the network is given, that's not endogenously working.
No, it's not.
So that's very important. When you contrast the reality, there is a network and then various things.
Sure, I go directly in my conclusions. Of course, what about networks being endogenously formed? This is something that I don't know how this would result in unidimensionality or not. I agree. And I also think it's very important, what if people put same weight, or what if people put different weight on issues across individuals? I may trust results about politics, but not about football or vice versa. Okay? And then, here I'm requiring same weight both politics.
Can I ask us?
Sure.
Okay. So the idea is that every time point t, I update my beliefs. Let's say how do you call this?
I avoid to call them beliefs, so that we don't think of the game theoretic sense of beliefs. So that's why I call it opinions.
Okay, opinions, fine. Okay. And I base my update on what I believed last period and what the people affecting me believed in the last period, but not the period before that.
No.
Okay, and at the same time, the matrix is the same. Can you interpret that as me not forgetting? So is it possible that the same matrix basically implies that I remember what happened in period t equal to 10, even if now we are in period 1000? is there
So here,
is there a memory assumption underlying? No, I guess.
I'm not sure. So here, the only thing you do is you wake up in the morning, you forgot about all your past, and what you do is you just check what these people told you recently in the update.
Yeah, but the weights are always the same.
The weights are always the same.
So
The weights are always the same.
okay.
They are the same up to this possible change in the relative weights I'm assigning to the network and to myself. So I can become one staggered.
But the interesting thing here is that t is a function, no, lambda is only a function of t. I and capital T, the
Exactly,
matrix are not.
Those remain the same. Yes. Yes.
No.
Not in the simulation, but I cannot tell you what are the precise listening sequences of listening matrices that will give me the results or not. But I can tell you that if I go and plug in my simulations, about 60% of the times I'm getting again the same result. And then why in the 40% of the times I'm not getting this result, I cannot. I can give you some, like as I said before, we don't want agents, for example, to become stubborn too quickly. We want the network to be strongly connected, but all these regulatory conditions on the sequence, I don't have.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to take this idea and put it in the lab. And just to give you an idea of how the task is going to look in the lab. So let me first say that we're going to be running 3 treatments in the lab. The 2 first are going to be fixing the network structure. And basically, by changing slightly the network from one treatment to the other, think of it as a direct test of the Marchova-Janossen's people paper. The 3rd treatment is going to say, okay, now don't fix the network structure, but create a random network, and I will describe you a bit how we're going to do this and see what are the results there. Now, in practice, the task looks like that for the subjects in my lab. They know there is 2 different tanks, and then tank 1 is going to be containing red and blue balls. Tank 2 instead is going to be containing green and orange balls. Now, subjects come in the lab, and they know that the number of balls of each color in each tank is random. And any combination is equally likely. Again, each of the 2 tanks contains 100,000 balls, independent, and each subject is going to observe a random sample of 100 balls from each tank. So before I report my opinion, I am observing an informative signal of 100 balls. So what is the task is to guess the correct number of red balls in tank 1 and the correct number of green balls in tank 2, where the number of red balls in tank 1 does not depend on the number of green balls in tank 1. And what subject did is to communicate their opinions and update their opinions from 10 rounds. In round 1, you only observe your signal, nothing else. And then from round 2 onwards, given the network structure, you say you see on your screen. In the past period, you said 43,649. Manoli said 56,782. What is now your opinion? And you update again and again. Remember, and this is important, and I apologize if I repeat many times, but people tend to forget, we observe only one informative signal before the whole process starts. When we start communicating, we're just observing the past guesses of its subject. Okay? So now, which are the treatments I'm going to be putting in the lab? I'm going to be using 3 treatments. I will call them fixed 1, fixed 2, and random. So fixed 1 treatment is the one I precisely described to you before. Individual 1 only observes 2, 2 observes 1 and 3, 3 observes 2, 4, and 5, 4 observes 3 and 5 observes only 4. Okay? In fixed 2 treatment, I'm keeping the same, think of it as benchmark network structure, and I'm adding an extra link where individual 5 now also listens to the opinions of individual 1. And this is the difference between fixed 1 and fixed 2. We can discuss later why these 2 networks, if you're interested. But these were the simplest ones, think of it like that, that gives us some meaningful treatment results by just adding one extra link. So this is the one-line justification. The random network, what did we do? We again have these 5 individuals coming in the subjects coming in the lab, and we keep the same in-degree as our original fixed one treatment, but this individual may vary from round to round. So individual 1 is always going to be observing the opinion of one neighbor. Individual 2 is going to be observing 2 neighbors, but not necessarily 1 and 3. It will be 2 and 5, it will be 2 and 4, and so on. Individual 3 is always going to be again of in-degree 3, 1, 2, 3. Individual 4 is going to be observing 2 neighbors. Individual 5 is going to be observing 1 neighbor. Are the treatments clear? Clear? Okay. So now, how? Then I'm going to come into my predictions. In practice in the lab, for every 10 rounds, my data look like that. So here I have what individuals report the first time. So now they observe the signal and they report something. And here I see what 1 reports, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And they're reporting their opinions on the 2 times. Updating once, updating twice, updating 3 times. Now, this one looks marvelous already. Why? Because this is precisely the prediction of the March-Avellanos people. We start all over the place here, and now after 3 rounds of communication, or even after 2, we are on this line. So this is the idea of unidimensionality. And then, as Manoli said, people after this round kind of stop updating. They get stuck to this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that they just did before, then they didn't move much around. And then all of a sudden, this individual 5 either made a mistake on typing, or it was a rainy day in the UK and was depressed and thought to make something fancy. All of a sudden, goes and says something weird. So think of it as a shock on the network. And now what we observe that despite this guy having said something random and then playing around and so on, again, individuals come on this line and then stop updating. Okay. So this is the idea of unidimensionality in the lab. And moreover, these positions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 precisely confirm also the expectation that we had from the March-Avellanos people paper. Do all these data have look so nice? No, of course not. I chose on purpose one that makes the point clearly nice. Other observations of 10 rounds are not 1 round. Okay. Is it okay? Yeah? Good. So let me state the hypothesis. Remember, I have 3 treatments. My hypothesis 1 is that opinions should become unidimensional in all treatments. Both the 2 fixed networks, the March-Avellanos paper, but also in the random networks that I presented you before. Now, hypothesis 2, I'm going to formulate it regarding relative positions in 2 different versions. One of it, the weak version is, the relative positions generically differ across treatments. This is one way to say it. Another way, the stronger version is, let me put some assumptions on the weights people are going to be assigning, simulate and see what is going to be happening, and then test whether the relative positions are going to be converging to the predicted values. The simplest model that one could think of as a starting point is to assume equal weights to oneself and others, as I showed you before. And then I will be doing a small extension because obviously it's not going to work great, this one. We know there's going to be a tension in the lab. So how am I going to present the results? And this is why I told you correlations is fine to think of, but let's avoid it because I will not be presenting the result in terms of correlations. I will use principal component analysis. And for any 5 individuals that report opinions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to be projecting these opinions on the first principal component and focus on 2 different things. To test the hypothesis 1 on unidimensionality, I'm interested in the percentage of the variance explained by the first principal component. So if all these guys are on the first principal component, correlation 1, then this will mean that 100% of the variance is explained by the first principal component. With 2 dimensions, the worst thing that can happen is that we are at 50%. So 50% looks like we're in a very bad situation in terms of correlation. 100% means that we are on the line. And why a principal component is because by projecting the opinions on the first principal component, I will be able to discuss about relative positions. This, we thought, is the most natural and the relatively easy way. It's not going to be very easy, but the relatively easy way to describe relative positions. So this is the variance explained by the first principal component. This is what my theory predicts, and this is what I observe in the data. And these are the formal tests to convince you that some action is indeed there. We can stick to the graph if you want for the purposes of the presentation, or we can go on with the empirical result. But in theory, fixed one and fixed two treatment, I'm expecting them. So let me say that we are starting with high percentages already explained because the signals MATLAB drew for us, and we followed this very scientific approach of not choosing the signals that MATLAB drew are going against us basically because we're starting already with quite high correlation. So we're starting with something around 80%. It would have been nicer if we were starting about 50%. Probably the result would have been much more spectacular, but let me say that here and here, theory or data, we are starting with quite high percentages, unfortunately. Having said that, the theory says that fixed one and fixed two should converge very fast. This is just 3 rounds of communication. You should be very fast, around 100%. Fixed two, which has this extra link, takes a bit more time, but also converges 100%. Random, which is random, is the one that takes slower, and even after 10 rounds does not converge 100% of the variance explained because the network structure is random, is varying every round. Okay. Now this is how the data looks like, and this is the fixed two that performs best of all. This is my fixed one, and this is my random network. Now, if I go to do some formal testing, it seems that with a non-parametric seasonal Mann-Kendall test for trend, I can reject the hypothesis of no positive trend. And these are the p-values for the fixed one, fixed two, and the random network, which the random network is the one with the highest p-value. So, if anything, there seems to be a movement towards unidimensionality in my lab. Now, this, of course, as I said, does not look as good as the theory predicts, and I will come in a bit in a while why potentially this would be one. Second prediction on the relative positions. So this is the simplest way we thought. We admit it's not very simple, so if you have any better ideas, you are more than welcome. Imagine I project these individuals 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. What I'm going to do is to say, because every time I see these individuals on this line, I need to fix a pair. So let me fix individuals 1 and 3. So here I'm taking as a comparison, I'm fixing everything relative to how 1 and 3 are placed on this first principal component. And then the question I'm asking is, if I observe that, let me read out loud. If I observe that 1 is on the left side of 3, what about 2 and 4? Are they concordant with 1 and 3, or are they placed the opposite? This is the kind of question I'm asking. So if 2 and 4 are concordant, so here 1 is, think of it, on the left of 3. Is 2 also on the left of 4 or on the same side of 4? Every time I'm going to be saying yes, I will be assigning a 1 here. Every time I'm going to say no, I will be assigning a 0 here. So this is a matrix where I'm having individuals 1 to 5, 1 to 5, and pairwise, whether they are on the left or the right. So now, if here I ask, is 3 on the left of 1, I put a 0, and then I ask, is 4 on the left of 2, then I'm also putting a 0 here. So here, these elements are symmetric. Whenever I put a 1 here, I put a 0 down here. or 1 here, 0 here, 1 here, 0 here, and so on and so forth. So now for this matrix, what matters eventually are these 9 elements I'm presenting you here. The diagonal is meaningless because I'm comparing the position of 1 with 1, 2, 2, 3, and 3. This is meaningless. This element is also meaningless because I'm fixing it and taking them as the comparison. Like, okay, let's see how 1 and 3 are placed, and then let's compare everyone else compared to the relative ranking. So this element is also irrelevant, and therefore I get rid of it. But these 9 elements are the remaining 9 elements are describing me the relative positions of individuals. Now, let me go back to the treatments and the Martzov-Jonassen-Zwiebel. The Martzov-Jonassen-Zwiebel say that in this treatment, I'm expecting individuals to be on the line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Instead, on this treatment, fix 2, that I added this extra link, the Martzov-Jonassen-Zwiebel predict that the relative positions are going to look like 1, 2, 5, 3, 4. And this is the treatment effect. What is happening here? Individual 5 all of a sudden gets information from the other side of the network, and therefore this makes individual 5 become a moderate one instead of an extremist one, which was the case for fixed 1. So the only difference, again, according to the Martzov-Jonassen-Zwiebel, is that here, once, here, what was it? You remember back in my theory again, I just, here, remember the example I did, right? We started it over here. Treatment 1 is something like that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Of course, let me say that it would be 4, 5, 4, 3 to 1. This is absolutely okay, and this is why we're focusing on the relative positions. But 5 is one of the 2 extremes, 3 the most moderate, and 2 and 4 somewhere in between. Treatment 2 instead, where I added this extra link, now 5 is not going to be here, but 5 is going to be in the middle. And the prediction by the Martzov-Jonassen-Zwiebel is 1, 2, 5, 3, and 4. Is it okay? So now, if I go then into these pairwise comparisons I made you through this matrix, what I'm going to be having is that the treatment is going to be captured by these 2 elements being 1 instead of being zeros here. So this element, what is it? The element that compares me 5 with 3 and 5 with 4. In one case, I'm expecting it to be 0, 0 because here, think of it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Instead, here, I'm expecting it 1, 2, 5, 3, 4. And this 5 coming in the middle is just visually coming from this matrix by these ones here because it's more moderate than 3 and 4. Compared to everything else. Is it okay, more or less?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Can I expand very quickly?
Yeah.
It seems to be that every fixed treatment that you have basically can correspond to a different capital T matrix. That makes sense. Like if you can go back to the
Sure. So this treatment,
yeah.
If I assign equal weights, is 1/2, 1/2. 1/3 one is the one I showed just in the example. Now, if I add this extra link, individual 5 is going to be 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
My question is the following. Now 5 affects 3's opinion, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then in the next round, 5
in the next
period, let's say, in the next T.
So I fix this treatment, fix 1.
Yes.
Okay.
In period 2,
yes.
5 will listen to 4, who will listen to 3, who in the previous period will listen to 5. So basically, I'm assigning a weight on my previous opinion, and now through you, number 3, I add another weight. So basically, even if you don't have the links and you just change the weights, it would be the same, no? I assign a higher weight to my former opinions, and this is captured through player 3 or subject 3. Okay.
Okay, so let me clarify that.
Yeah.
there are two different things here. One is the network structure, and the other is the listening matrix.
Yes.
Okay? In the lab, I'm varying the network, which by definition varies also the listening matrix. Okay? Of course, even if I have the same network, it can be that individuals from round to round change the listening matrix. This is absolutely okay. Now, what you just described, I think, is a feature of both treatments with a fixed network. So, this way, what you are telling me is that after 2 rounds of communication, there is information that I had in the beginning. So here, individual 5 observes the signal. Normally, what do? You report your signal, there is nothing else. In the lab, people don't exactly report their signal, they go a bit towards the mean. So if I get, from 0 to 100, I get 89 volts, maybe I'm saying, 89, it looks a bit too much, let me go to 83 or something like that. So this is what practice has. But normally, you should roughly relate to the signal. Now, individual 5, as you said, so in the first round of communication, 3 gets this information, then through 4, and then again. So precisely, individual 5 fails to do anything type of Bayesian. The standard approach of an economist is okay, but what if individuals were not so naive and they were Bayesian, and they were able to say that, look, there is not so much information. So ideally, or a rational individual, a rational subject, what they would do is to try to guess the state of the world based on the observed signals and try to filter out all the repeated information that comes through here. Okay? If you want to be Bayesian here, it's a nightmare. It's very, very tough. Okay? And actually, past experimental results only in one dimension precisely want to see if subjects are naive Bayesian or the group type of models I showed you do well or not. And actually, these naive models of updating, when the task is very complicated, perform quite decently. I'm not saying it's precisely this matrix, but if anything, this type of updating seems to work better than fully Bayesian, fully rational individuals. But to conclude, the issue what you commented is true both in fixed 1 and fixed 2. It may vary, of course it varies how much and how fast you get back the information and so on, because
so it seems to me that in fixed 2, in the second round, let's say, I will listen from number 1 the thing that reached him through me. So the first round 5 will affect 4. Okay, first round 5 affects 4 and 3.
Yeah.
In a couple of rounds, this signal will reach number 1.
Sure.
And the round after, what 1 learned from 5 during the past 3 rounds will reach 5 again.
Sure.
So I will basically.
And what 5 reported to 3 is going to come back to 5 to 4 2.
Yes,
so it's repeated information that the individuals fail to take into consideration. Yeah. There is no new information. It's just the same information that keeps circulating. Okay. So now, then, if we understood these ones here, I can predict your expectations of what should happen in the random network as I'm creating the random network, where I'm randomly picking one individual for 1. Remember here, I'm seeking 1 here, 2 here as an degree, but it's different people to see along the way. These guys are going to be listening to 3 individuals and so on. I can predict you something that, of course, is not going to be something far from 0 and 1, because things are going to depend on the way people went. But in expectation, this is what we should be observing, and then we're going to come back to some predictions about the random network in a bit. Now, let me show you the results, and I think they are quite nice. Here, I'm plotting you. You don't have to pay attention. I will tell you what is the nice bit. So here, I'm plotting you across the 10 rounds of communication. The value of each element I'm comparing. So here I have 5 against 4, 5 against 3, 5 against 2, and so on and so forth. And this is my fixed one, and this is my fixed one theoretical. So here in the theoretical benchmark, you remember, all these elements should convert to 0, or my 9 elements should convert to 0. And in my data, what I observed is that indeed all these elements go down, they don't converge to zero, but it seems that often we are moving, let's say, towards zero. Instead, in my fix 2, what was the idea? All elements but 2, which was the comparison between 5 and 4 and 5 and 3, all elements convert to 0, but these 2 elements that should converge to 1. And I think the data is very nice here and illustrative. These values would tend to go down to 0, and we're observing 2 that are different. We would like them to go to 1, but I think it's too demanding here. Already the fact that those 2 are different as expected from the theory prediction, I think is very much in line with the natural expectation. And this is a random, but again, let me go a bit in the random in a bit, which I'm going to do right here now. So for the random network, rather than focusing on these 9 elements, that is a bit of confusing. I think what is interesting is to focus. This is my theoretical benchmark, and this is my data, on the relative extremeness of individuals. So the random network looked like that. Individual 1 was observing only 1, individual 2 was observing 2, 3 was observing 3, 4 was observing 2, and 5 was observing 1. Now the random treatment tells me, so first of all, so here, if you see small values, it's the extremeness of individuals. So if this is small, it means that we are moderate, and this is big, it means we are extremists, okay? And here I'm having the name of individual, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here, the theory predicts that these 2 individuals, 1 and 5, that are the ones that are observing just one neighbor, are the ones that are eventually going to be extremists. Individual 3, who is the one who gets more of information, is going to be the one who is more moderate. And individual 2 and 4 are somewhere in between. And I think this is natural, right? So this individual is someone who's getting a lot of information. This person is going to be the moderate one. These people who are observing just one individual is most likely that they're going to be the ones that are going to be more extremists. So this is what the theory predicts. This is where my data in the first round looks, how it looks like. And again, here you see, I'm predicting something that's going to look like inverted U-shape, and I'm starting with something that looks exactly the opposite. So here, it goes completely against what I would like to happen. And instead, my data, after a bit of updating, you see that it reverts completely, and 1 and 5 are more extremists, 3 is more moderate, and so on. So there seems to be action along the predicted positions, also in the random network. So to conclude, and I think it's okay, I'm okay in terms of time, yeah? So we're fine. So to conclude, what we're going to do is to try to see an heterogeneity exercise. And this goes a bit along the lines of Manolis, I think that you were saying, yeah, but maybe we're not always updating and assigning equal weights. So what I'm going to do is, I assume that people may have different lambdas to the network here, or to themselves as time goes by. So basically, lambda equals 1 is an individual who always listens to the network. Lambda equals 0 is someone who is only listening to themselves and stop updating. So 0 is the extreme stubborn guy, 1 is the extreme equal weights all the time around the network. And then we go into the data to see what people do, and we do some k-means clustering and estimate the lambdas that explain individual behavior. And here I present you 4 behavioral types, even 3 or 5, more or less you always get the same structure. You get some individuals that look really like the group, very nice guys who are always assigning 1 to the network. You're getting some others that in the very beginning, they do update quite a bit according to the network, and then become stubborn slowly. Instead, you get some other guys who start tracking the network just a bit, and then become stubborn very fast. So these are here representing 4 different behavioral types. Now, given that I have gone back into my data and estimated these behavioral types, I take these behavioral types and I simulate in my model. And I say, okay, let's see what would have happened if these four behavioral types we're going to be driving individuals' behavior. And this is the heterogeneous model where you never convert to 100. And why is that? Because imagine you end up having all of the guys looking like that stubborn, then you would never go up to 100. But what is even more interesting, I think, is if I compare the relative positions. And the relative positions in the heterogeneous model look precisely similar to the relative positions we are observing in our data. And so is the case here. The theoretical benchmark, I was expecting all these elements to converge to 0. In the heterogeneous model, no, they will not converge to 0. They would go down, similar as our behavior in the lab, but not converging to 0 entirely. So just to conclude, we think that we'll make a point. Unfortunately, we cannot call it, a proper theory extension generalization, since we are missing a bit of structure on what is permitted or not. But I think our simulations clearly hint to the fact that unidimensionality is a broader feature than what we thought, according to the March of Innocence Peter paper. And we are also saying that networks are important. Of course, there are several restrictions that we already discussed before. And the experiment says that, indeed, communications gives rise to unidimensionality, and the networks are important, but so is heterogeneity. And, in the lab, we take this process as an as-if model and test the aggregate predictions, let's say, of this process. But of course, it seems that heterogeneity is there. But even adding a bit of heterogeneity, the results are kind of aligned with the original March of Innocence paper. And with that, I thank you very much. And I think I will try to go through.
Do you have any questions from the floor? People online also, you can ask something if you want. Very nice stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Maria